Good morning. Thanks for coming out for the first session of the day. I know it's hard to get started, but excited to kick off this first session for our fall forum for learning technologies. So today we're going to talk about ROI. This is a talk actually I've given for a couple years. Our CEO gave this talk at this forum in the spring, so it's something that we think a lot about, and we'll talk some about that. But I've been thinking a lot over the last year also about results, and maybe that there's something beyond ROI that we should be thinking about that's not moving our profession forward, that's not moving our learning programs forward. So we're going to start with ROI and then talk a little bit about how we could be challenging ourselves and our teams to think about results instead of just return on investment. So I'm Frances Clevin. I'm the Director of Enterprise Customer Success at LearnUpon. So my company, LearnUpon, we're a learning management system. My background is entirely in learning, so excited to spend a half an hour to just geek out about learning metrics. There's nothing more that I like talking about. I obviously work for a software company, but learning is really the thing that I'm super passionate about. I started my career as a university professor, and as much as I love being in the classroom, there's nothing better than that. I just couldn't spend my weekends grading papers, and so I decided to move into the administrative side of things, where I worked with universities on their digital learning strategy, whether that was digital learning in the classroom or digital learning in more of a remote sense. So I worked with them as they were thinking about what the expectations were for their learners and their business around digital learning. And then I moved to Coursera to work then with universities and a for-profit company about making learning available online to all learners. And now I work with LearnUpon with our customers on their corporate learning strategies, whether that's training their employees or training their customers. So today I wanted to chat about how we're currently thinking about ROI, and then why we might be thinking about results beyond ROI, and what a results-centered training strategy could look like. And that sounds amazing, but I think we then need to acknowledge why this is really, really, really hard. And so I have some ideas about why that's hard and some ideas about how we might be able to overcome some of those challenges. And then I want to make sure that I leave you with some ideas about where you could start focusing your results for your training programs. So first, starting with what we're measuring and we're not measuring in the learning industry. So the good news is that we are at a place where we're regularly measuring our metrics. So Chief Learning Officer surveyed learning professionals and said, hey, in your learning programs, what are you measuring? So this is really interesting to me, and normally I would start at the top, but I actually think what's really interesting here is down at the bottom are the business metrics. So sales, ROI, employee retention, net promoter score, those are all the business metrics. At the top are employee response, employee engagement, and what's interesting and warms my heart is these are our learning metrics. These are the things that as learning professionals we care so much about. We care so much about the learner experience, so of course we would measure that. And that's great, and I don't want to lose sight of that. But I also want to acknowledge there's something that's making us shy away from measuring the business metrics or talking about the business metrics. And I would also say we lean towards those because they're the ones we can control and there's the ones that we can understand. So it's good news though. This is great. We are engaging with the data. We're measuring how learners engage with training, and that wasn't the case 10 years ago. So this is really, really promising. And we've actually moved the industry forward where now learning and training they're now seen as a necessity, and they're not an experiment anymore. They're not a nice to have. It's essential now that businesses expect to train their employees, train their customers, train their volunteers. But in what we're measuring, are we measuring the right things? Are we, again, I think we lean towards the higher level, easier to find metrics. And we're asking the questions that we're comfortable with. Did you like this course? Did you find this course engaging? But we're not asking the questions about what was the impact that this course had on the results of our business. The one I always come back to is completion rates. So everybody loves to talk about completion rates. Every customer I talk to, every prospect I talk to says, when I ask, what are you looking to measure? And they say completion rates, because it's an easy metric to measure, but I also think if we dig a little bit deeper, it's something that in the early stages of online learning, completion rates was the thing that people pointed to say online learning doesn't work. There's low completion rates, this doesn't work. And it came from people who honestly thought it wasn't going to work in the first place. So I think we go to completion rates because we've become very defensive about it, and completion rates is the thing to say, no, this works, people engage with the training, they complete the courses. But completion doesn't actually matter. It doesn't actually mean a business result. But I would say it does make sense why we're leaning towards that. So one thing we can think about measuring is return on investment. So that the idea that you are looking at your learning budget is X amount of dollars, whether that's for your employees or your customers, and what is the return on investment that you see from your training programs. So that's where I'm going to diverge a little bit and say maybe instead of ROI, because it's a good thing to measure. It's definitely a business metric. It's something that resonates in business language. But I think actually there's something else that we could be pushing ourselves to say, we're going to be responsible for results, and we're going to measure results. And I think that is something that it gets us out of just defending our budget and being protective of our budget, and it's actually saying, no, our training, our learning teams, they deliver actual business results to our company. So why results? Why this instead of ROI? So I think if we're just being honest, revenue sits at the top objectives for most organizations, even nonprofits. I talk to nonprofits all the time, and of course they have a wonderful mission, but revenue is always at the top of some of their metrics in terms of being sustainable. In terms of donations, this is always reducing costs. Revenue is always important. And if we talk about results, I think we can move beyond justifying just our existence and saying, no, we pay for ourselves. But actually we can say our training programs drive revenue. That's what we do. We drive revenue. Or we reduce costs. Not sometimes as exciting as driving revenue, but reducing costs is still a really important business metric, and especially in tough times, it's something that's on the top of everyone's mind, and it's sometimes a mandate across all teams of we need to reduce costs. And learning programs can actually not just reduce their own budgets, but they can contribute to reducing costs across the organization. The thing I'm most passionate about is the psychological impact of talking about results and driving results can have. I talk to training teams all the time. I'm a learning professional, and it breaks my heart, but I have so much empathy for it. People in the learning professional feel that they're considered administrative, they're considered a cost center, they're not considered a highly skilled team, they're maybe a necessary evil within the organization of they deliver compliance training. But no one feels really supported, really celebrated in their organization. And having our training programs really focused around business results, I think makes a huge psychological impact for us to move away from that feeling of we're just administrators of something, but we're actually a driver of business results, and we're not a nice to have, and we're not a necessary evil. And again, then justifying our existence too of, no, this isn't something you can just cut when you don't have the budget for it. And then strategic. So we're obviously ensuring that our learning strategy is at the forefront of business strategy, so that when our companies are talking about their OKRs, learning and training is always part of that. Again, whether we're training our employees or we're training our customers. But the other thing I think about, and I think about it as it relates to my company as a software company, is what is our long-term strategy for recruiting and retaining L&D talent? The last 2 years, I have seen massive turnover because, as with many other industries, but the last 3 years were hard on training teams. They were really hard on learning professionals because, A, we existed in a world where there wasn't a lot of respect for the profession anyway, and then everyone was working remotely, or businesses were completely changing their model, or people were having to figure out COVID protocols, and training teams were now responsible for completely changing the way they were delivering training, and sometimes responsible for doing that overnight. And it felt really scary. It felt like an incredible amount of work, and I don't think there was a lot of appreciation for that. So I know there's turnover across all industries, but I've seen it massively in L&D teams, and losing great talent and not being able to recruit great talent, because it's not seen as a profession that is really, again, commercial and driving business results and the ability to do really cool and powerful things. So all of these are important. This one I think a lot about. I can see that training programs are really struggling because they're struggling to keep people, and they're struggling to find really great people who can drive a vision. So what could this look like? So we'll start with aspirational. I promise I'll get to why this is really hard, because you're going to all think that it is really hard. So I sat with my customer success managers about a year ago, and we said, what are the results that our customers are looking to do with their training programs? And I honestly thought it was going to be a challenge to keep us under 20, but I was like, let's get to under 20. But actually what we came up with was 5 and 4. So I'll talk through. We think about this as internal, external. So employees, that would be employees and volunteers, and then external, customers and partners. So internal, our employee training, that we think that there are 4 objectives, and we've been working with our customers with this for over a year, and we have not found another objective that I would agree to put on this slide. So we think there are 4 common objectives that employee training programs should be measuring. So improving employee performance, that's obviously very broad, and sometimes it might be very narrow. So sometimes it might be reducing the time to resolution for tickets from your support team. It might be something where we have this OKR for our company for our new sales hires, increasing their win rate within the first 6 months. So improving employee performance. Increasing employee retention, that's the example I'm going to talk a lot about today, because actually the customers I've spoken with in the last 6 months, when I say what's top of mind in your business, employee retention is the thing that comes up as something that is keeping people up at night. Like, we see a huge risk in our business that we are not going to be able to recruit and retain people. Decreasing employee training cost. So can you actually look at the cost that you are investing in training your employees and reduce that cost? This is the one I hate because it's so boring and it's so unsexy, but improving and documenting compliance. And I actually took this off the list, but I had customers who convinced me to put it back on, and customers who are in highly regulated industries, so in finance, in healthcare, and insurance. And they said, Francis, that's a top company goal for us to reducing risk, but also reducing financial risk. We get fined if we are not in compliance. We get financial benefits if we are in compliance. So as much as I roll my eyes and yawn a bit about that being there, the reality is it absolutely is a business metric. If we're training our external stakeholders, so our customers and our partners, we're thinking about, again, decreasing training costs. So what does it cost to train our customers? What is our implementation costs? What are our support costs? What does it cost to train our customers? Decreasing support costs. So from our support team, what is the cost of a customer ticket? What is the cost of a customer phone call? Can we decrease that through better training? Improving client retention. So this relates to revenue, which is the next one, but I know that for some companies for a year, they may say, we're actually really focused on retaining our customers, and revenue, yes, is important, but logo retention is critical. So client retention, increasing revenue, that's the obvious one. And then this one I love, increased reach, awareness, and footprint. And so it definitely is our nonprofits and NGOs. We work with the National Education Association, and their business goal is to become the standard of excellence in the teaching profession in the US, which is amazing. So we start our calls always with, that's our objective. But it's also our corporate customers who are saying, our goal for the year, obviously revenue is nice, but our top goal for the year is awareness, so brand awareness, so increasing our footprint, and our training programs feed into that. So what could this look like? And we're going to go from left to right. And this is interesting because I think when we were talking about ROI solely, we were really living in the world of drivers and metrics. And also when we're talking about software, we were really living in the world of solutions. And all of those are important to talk about. But really, we have to start with our objectives. And this is anytime we have a prospect, anytime we have a new customer, any call that I get on with any of our customers, I always say we have to start with our objectives. What are our objectives? And they're not learning objectives, they're business objectives. And it's super scary, but they have to be business objectives. So they're usually defined in economic terms. They're high level, they're high value, they're critical to the wider success of the business, and they're broad. They're broad enough to support the drivers. So the drivers are interesting because this is where our learning metrics come in. So I think it's really critical that we don't say we're throwing out engagement rates, we're throwing out learner surveys, we're throwing out completion rates. That's where they sit in your drivers and metrics. So this is where you say course completion is going to drive the objective of employee retention or drive the objective of compliance completion. So this is where we state this as an increase or a decrease. We're measuring this with real data, and it's achievable. And then our metrics, these are going to be what represent our drivers. And I'll show you an example of this so we can talk through that. But they represent the drivers. They're measurable. Again, those are our completion rates. They have a baseline data. So we're going to improve our completion rates for our, actually, compliance. This isn't, I hate talking about compliance, but one thing that everybody hates about compliance is having to remind people to complete it. So, but in the end, you can usually get to 100% completion. So this customer said, let's throw out the 100% completion metric because we have to get there anyway. Let's make a goal for ourselves to get to 75% completion within the first 3 weeks. And let's reward people who do that because we hate reminding them. They hate it when we remind us. So let's actually make this a more cost-effective for us in terms of reducing the time we spent reminding people and say our goal is just to get people to complete it quickly. And then our solutions. So this is going to be all of your technology and services. It's going to be your processes, your behavior. Sometimes there's a behavior change required, or it might be needed expertise. This is because we've been working with this framework for a year now. I was vetting vendor software we're launching a customer community. And because we were talking about with our customers, when I went into that vendor assessment process, I started with objectives. My rubric for everybody who was vetting the software were objectives. And I didn't walk into that and say, I'm looking for a feature set. I said, I'm looking for something that helps us achieve objectives. So I'm looking for something that helps us improve customer retention, grow revenue, and increase awareness. And it was interesting because then I found the vendors who could talk to me about that. We picked Influitive. I'll give a little plug for them for their community platform because actually the conversations that they were the ones that when I said I want to talk about this, they said, great, let's talk about that. We probably spent 10% of the time talking about features. And so it was a really useful framework just for me in terms of thinking about where I wanted software to fit on this, and that software wasn't going to shape my objectives. Software was going to be a solution that helped me achieve my objective. So what could this look like? This is an example of an employee training program. Normally we'd have 2 or 3 objectives. I just broke it down here to have one. And I picked employee retention as I promised because it's the thing that's been top of mind. Every company, every organization I talk to, employee retention is top of mind. So we're saying that what drives employee retention? Employee engagement and employee satisfaction. And that's a hypothesis. We also need to test these things, but we're saying we believe that increased employee engagement in training and increased employee satisfaction on our employee survey is going to drive retention. So what are our metrics? We're going to increase employee retention by 10%. We're going to improve our engagement scores by 10 points. We're going to reduce new employee time to effectiveness from 8 weeks to 5 weeks. And that's such a great goal for a training program. Like if you could do that and you say we reduced our time to effectiveness and we know that that improves employee retention, that's incredibly powerful. This is my favorite. I stole this from one of our customers, that they have a goal to increase open positions filled by internal candidates from 2% to 12%. And they believe that that directly relates to employee retention. And obviously it does, right? If you can help people advance in their careers and go into new positions, that's going to improve your employee retention. The cool thing here is they also have it connected to revenue, because their HR team was able to tell them the cost of flying a new position, and it's not unsubstantial. It's a lot to fly a new position, marketing, hiring, doing training, and the reduced cost, if you can say, we're gonna add 10 percentage points to the number of internal candidates we can put into an open role. So then your solutions are going to be, they're your projects. We need to build a company and team level onboarding program. We need to have career pathways. We need to have apprenticeship programs. We need to make sure that we have a robust engagement survey. Tech stack integration is probably on everyone's, and it should be, because it is the thing that is going to allow us to pull all of this data together and start thinking about the results, so that we have our CRM, our HRIS, our LMS all connected, all of our tech stack. And of course, a fantastic LMS, LearnUpon, so cheeky little plug there. But absolutely, if you're talking about learning, you need to be talking about your learning tools. So all that sounds great. It sounds like, yes, of course, this would be so exciting to work on. We're going to improve employee retention, but this is so hard, like really, really hard, like harder than I thought it was going to be. We're a year into this, and it's so hard for my customer success managers to say to customers, we're going to talk about results. We're not going to talk about, we obviously need to talk about features. We need to talk about content, but we have to start with results, and results are going to frame all of our conversations. And it's hard. It's hard for customer success managers to talk in that commercial language, but it's so hard for our customers. And so it's absolutely behavior change. But it's also, for us as a software company, we know that this is a key to our success, because we need our customers not just to successfully use our platform, we need them to see results. So we need to know that at renewal, that they say LearnUpon drives our employee retention, LearnUpon drives our revenue. It's critical to our success. The other thing that I think, or top of list for why this is so hard, is it's the imposter syndrome, and it's real, and it's with everyone. And I'm just a system administrator or an instructional designer. Who am I to talk about a company's strategy and business objectives? I see that from my customer success managers too. I'm a customer success manager for a software company. Who am I to walk into a meeting with a customer and say we need to talk about your business objectives? But we have to ask ourselves and others to change the way that we think about our work. And that's really exciting, but it's also really hard. But it's the most impactful thing that we can do for us and for our businesses. We surveyed our customers to talk about what are the challenges they have in doing this type of measurement or getting this type of data. So these will all sound very familiar to everyone, I would imagine. Lack of goals, unsure how to measure, lack of data, lack of resources, unsure of what even to measure. The thing that I think is interesting about this, if you dig into it, is the goals aren't absent, the data isn't absent, the resources sometimes are absent, they're just hard to find, so hard to find. Goals are within an organization. Somebody in an organization has the OKRs, somebody has the KPIs. They don't always trickle down, but somebody has them, so they're there. And so you absolutely can find them. The data is usually there. It just sits across different systems, and it might sit with people who don't want to give it to you. And I think that's the lack of resources, where sometimes it's a lack of funding, sometimes it's a lack of personnel, but sometimes it's just the lack of support or even respect to when you go to someone and say, I would like to look at this data, or I'd like to talk about that data, and just not having people who are receptive to that. And then I think fear overlies all of this. Nobody's going to admit that the reason that they don't measure their learning in this way is fear, but it absolutely is. I can see it when I talk to customers. I can see it even when I think about it, when I say, to my customer success managers, we're going to measure our performance based on the results that our customers achieve. It's really scary because now we are responsible for what our customers are doing and what results they're achieving. And we're going to say we're not going to care about NPS. We're going to care about results. We don't have clear goals, so definitely don't silo L&D away from the business. You should be meeting with your organization's leadership, sales, success, support, all of it, HR, so that you can set those clear goals and be aligned. And it's a massive opportunity to brand yourself, to help your team brand themselves when you're creating that type of alignment. We're not sure what to measure, so the thing that I think here is that if we can identify, again, those 4 things, those 5 things, that now we just need to ask, what's the priority? And you kind of know if you ask yourself, what's the priority for our company this year? Is it revenue? Is it retention? Is it growth? And then run an experiment. The scary part I find is that, well, we don't know if our training programs contribute to employee retention. That's okay. Have a hypothesis. So say we're going to look at course completions and how they relate to first-year retention. Run that experiment, and if you don't see that impact, then think about how you can drive that impact. But when you develop your result strategy, you don't have to say definitively, this is how it will work. We don't have the data or resources. Again, I think it's likely that they're there. And again, with all the empathy in the world, I run a customer training program, and it is, we're rolling up a new piece of software, and I work for the nicest company. No one ever says no to things, but I know I don't have the resources for some things. I know I don't have the resources to set up some of the custom integrations that I want. So finding those resources, finding the data, sometimes it's hunting for things, sometimes it's connecting with people in other departments, finding people who have incentives to be looking at those metrics. Always I go to my sales team because they are always, yes, we need to figure out how to sell better, and so let's run an experiment. So the things I'd like you to take away from this, and I'm going to give you some action items after this. So identify the key business priorities and objectives and the drivers in your training programs that will contribute to those results. We have to accept that behavior change is required for this. It just is. And I don't want to change. I hate change more than anything. But I have to change my behavior. We have to change our behavior as learning professionals. We need to collaborate, challenge, measure, share, revise, improve, iterate. And I put celebrate there because we don't celebrate enough. I challenge my customers all the time. So we're going to start measuring this. We're going to set this goal. We're going to achieve this result or try for this result. What are we going to do to celebrate? It's so, so important. And learning should be simple, but the impact should be big. The impact of learning should be transformative. So what I'm leaving you with to do after this session is find your company's or your organization's OKRs, KPIs, whatever you use in your organization. Can you state them? I challenge myself for that of I need to know what are the 3 most important OKRs in my company at any given moment, and can my learning team, can my training team iterate them? Can I identify who needs to know and to contribute to the result strategy? So I'm rolling up a customer training program, and who needs to know about it? My sales team needs to know about it, my executive team needs to know about it, my support team needs to know about it, and I'm going to continue to report to them on my result strategy. Talk to your team about the gaps that they see and the opportunities for looking at measuring results. Set your result strategy for your L&D team, and practice. I practice with my team every week these conversations. I practice with customers these conversations. I have a customer we've been practicing for 6 months so that she can go ask her support team for their support ticket data because she's so afraid to make that ask, and she doesn't know how to ask, and she doesn't know why she's asking. So we've been practicing for 6 months, and that's just our goal, to ask support team to get the data so she can do an analysis of the correlation between tickets submitted and her training programs. So this is hard. You have to build the muscle, and just again, as we've been doing this for a year, it's still a muscle that we're building. It's still something that we struggle with every day, but it's a lot more fun. It's a lot more impactful, and it's just opened up so many interesting conversations. And I hope it will for you and your training programs. I don't think we have time for questions. We're right at the hour, but I am around. I will be at the booth over here. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I think my email is in the program, so happy to chat about this. And thanks for coming out at this early morning session.